Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Licorice Pizza. This was directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. I've been excited about this movie for a really long time. It is to me kind of Paul Thomas Anderson's love letter to his adolescence, the place that he grew up, the time in which he grew up. Obviously because he grew up in California in the 70s and his father was in the business. And this does feel like a movie that would happen maybe later in a director's career. Mainly because, it reminds me of Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is also kind of a midlife crisis reflection of sorts. And of course, a certain perspective on nostalgia and what that means in kind of a meta sort of sense. But to me, Licorice Pizza is better in every single way. I like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but this is like next level. This is a wonderful piece of filmmaking. It is easily one of the best movies of the year for me, and I think it truly is a movie where Paul Thomas Anderson is coming full circle, because it does remind me of Boogie Nights naturally, because it takes place in the same time essentially, and it is that similar sort of time capsule zeitgeisty piece that is relying very heavily on the technical flourishes, the editing flourishes. Stylistically, that's what's building a lot of the tension, and that's great. I really do like Boogie Nights a lot, but I do feel like it's a less mature version of a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's later work, especially a film like this, which is kind of honed in. The focus is a little bit stronger here, and he can draw out a lot more subtleties within the piece. Make them more rich and dense from the actual core of it, the center, rather than all the stuff at the surface like he did with films like Boogie Nights and Magnolia. It also kind of reminds me of David Fincher. I look at the film Seven, which is a film I absolutely adore. It's really a wonderful film, but then you look at what he made many years later, Zodiac, and I feel like it was kind of a response to Seven, a more mature version of that, somebody who's more self-reflective, someone more interested in subtlety rather than kind of more grandiose themes of that nature. But this film in particular, Licorice Pizza, it's very episodic. It feels very much like vignettes, and it's always kind of lumbering along. It starts in one place and then it hangs out here, 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 and it's always kind of going in unexpected directions. And it feels very much like a fun summer day with your friends. When you would wake up, be really excited to meet with your friends out on the street, and you end up somewhere you never thought you would. And then suddenly mom is calling you in for dinner, and it's like, where did the time go? Really, this movie has that feeling for me. Everything is just very pure and serendipitous. It's all just so in the moment, the feeling, the viscera of it. And it also reminded me, maybe it's because Joan Didion has passed recently, but she's been on my mind a lot. Somebody that I greatly admired as a writer. And just her way of putting you in the place and rooting you in the time in which she's talking about, this has that similar feeling to it. It's all in the details. Every inch of the frame is important. It must be said, and it has been said many times, but no one builds worlds like Paul Thomas Anderson. It's really true. I reviewed Power of the Dog recently as an example, and a beautiful, beautiful piece. And yet, to me, it looked still like actors performing roles. We watched There Will Be Blood. That felt absolutely real. Fully plunges you into that world, and this fully plunges you into the 1970s, early 1970s California. Every little thing, as I said, is authentic. Everything from Coke bottles, empty Coke bottles that are left on the dashboard in the sun, to just little threads of a periwinkle prairie dress, that was popular in the 70s. If you were alive in this time, obviously I was not, but I can only imagine it would be even more resonant for you, because everything just oozes with that period. It makes me wish that I lived in that time, and I think the great works really are able to do that. Where you actually had to look into people's eyes and you weren't always looking at a phone. I love the idea of just waking up and running around and being like, hey, where's Max? Oh, you just missed him. He's down the street, rather than just texting them. There's a sense of real environment, really living and soaking up all you can within a moment and from the people. It's so much more present in these times than it is today. But there's also that rebelliousness and that liberation and the feeling of you could get away with so much more back then, even though in a sense there was more naivete. The aged colors, like the oranges and the yellows and the greens that were so prominent in the 1970s, you see that all around, and it always gives you just kind of a little bit of a sour feeling, and yet there's a charm to it. There's a warm glow around everything at the same time. It feels very human amidst all the artificiality. Sometimes it is the awkward and very irreverent nature of these characters that is what is so engaging, and how you meet one and and then another, and then another. What the film seems to be doing is, it's taking the romantic movie formula, or like the romantic comedy, all of those beats and everything, and it's kind of loosening them up a little bit, making them a little bit more casual, giving it a little bit room to breathe so that we can make room for things that may not be necessary for the plot, but they add so much richness to the overall piece. Make room for incidental moments, to stop and smell the roses, meet new people, and experience new things so that you can kind of subvert a lot of those expectations one might have when watching a traditional love story. In that sense, it's very reminiscent of a movie like Chungking Express, which, is a movie about love. It's essentially a love story in a sense, but the relationship never is truly fully realized really until the end. And I think it's very important that it's not fully realized throughout the entire movie. That's how I think you buy into it, how you go along with it, despite, the transgressive nature of it. And there are several keys to that, I think, making that work. One of them is because it is a coming of age story, first and foremost, but it's Alana's coming of age story. She is the protagonist here because she's a person who has lived in this land of dreams, Hollywood, her whole life. She's a California native and she's 25 years old, and yet she feels very aimless in her life. She's in that sort of in-between stage, even though she is an adult, and all of these people, I think, are in that stage maybe at different times of their life, but they can sort of connect in that way. And for her, she never really found a direction. And I think there is something very unique, obviously because I don't have this experience, but from the experience of a young kid growing up in California where movies are made, having that insight into kind of the behind the scenes and all of that must really change the way you view romanticism. And I'm sure it has for her as well. Because people who live outside of Hollywood, we see it as movies and they're very glamorous. To them, it's an industry that's been around them all the time. And there's something really interesting about that, the idea of, growing up in that atmosphere. Maybe that's part of why you never did find a direction. I'm not saying that necessarily for that character, but the idea is something that did cross my mind, because she is a character who likely is just thinking all the time about, what if, or maybe someday. But what I think is so wonderful about this is the idea of Hollywood is not really prominent on the surface. It's more kind of just this wistful nostalgia that has weight to it, but it's more nudged in a corner for a while. And it slowly kind of becomes more resonant as the film goes. I think Paul has a little bit more confidence to just let it go, and he'll kind of wreathe all these unique different plot points and characters and situations around it. Hollywood has a huge power over Paul, obviously, and I'm sure it's changed a lot dramatically over time. And so it is nice to see him sort of taking a formula that we all know and kind of using it in a way where he can reflect and add a lot of what is personal to him. It's a way to be conscious of certain conventions, a lot of that romanticism that is at the center of the idea of Hollywood, but also finding a way to bring in real gravitas and moments that would otherwise feel meaningless. That is what is really special. It's such a tough thing to do, to take meaningless moments and suddenly make them feel deeply important or very poignant, and he does it like a fucking master. To me, a lot of the greatest Hollywood movies are the ones that maybe the director is very flashy, but they don't necessarily rely on the flash in order to create the resonance. They have more of an internal confidence, and it works certainly here, because I really felt like it was like I had a good book, that I could read over and over and over and always find new things each time I read it. The themes are not on the surface, and the power of it is hidden, where you, I think, have to really search for it. And it might take you multiple times to find out what it does mean to you on a personal level. And I think a lot of the more brazen auteurs are more willing to go all in for the meta sort of examination in the way that, like in The Matrix, I just reviewed that. That would be maybe a negative example. And this is one where he just does everything perfectly right. He's not hammering in anything. He really allows everything to sink in, to stay a while. And, I think that really just comes from somebody who's a mature artist, somebody who is more interested in the honest moments. Always in this movie, even though there's just such a comfort about it, there is always a tension to it. Because, there's always this idea of uncertainty. Will they or won't they? Or what does the future hold for all of these different people who are just living so in the moment, in this time that they'll never get back? Feeling lost, especially due to your age or your social group, what is expected of you, that's something that everybody can relate to. And that's certainly something that, we can relate to Alana in that way, because she is a girl who clearly needs to get her shit together, and she wants to get her shit together, yet she is drawn to this spirited youth. She's drawn to this like 15-year-old, charmer slash hustler named Gary, who was played, of course, by Cooper Hoffman, the late Philip Seymour Hoffman's son. And my goodness, every time there's a close-up and he smiles, my heart did break a little bit, just constantly seeing his father's face in him. But he also melts your heart, and he really does sweep you up in all of his charm. He makes you believe he has that kind of confidence while also being quite naive at the same time. But it's his confidence that she's drawn to, because he's bold, he's young, he has ideas, and he acts on them. But also, he's kind of in the business, he's an actor doing commercials and such. And again, all of this is very attractive to Lana, seeing people on the cusp of adulthood. And, she also needs that sort of reinvigoration. Just unfortunately here, the timing is all wrong, because she's 25 and he's 15. And Alana is played so beautifully, absolutely wonderful, wonderful casting. And her face is just so perfect for the part. She has such a 70s look to her, but there's an energy and a light from her always. She radiates every single moment. And you always feel that uncertainty in her, this pull, like where she feels like she's stuck in two worlds, or she has her feet in two worlds, knowing that she's not a kid anymore, and yet they make her feel alive, but also knowing that she needs to look to the future. But in doing so, she realizes it becomes very dull, and it's aimless in a different way, in a soul-sucking sort of way. And yet there's so much she's realizing in many faceted ways through that experience, because as I said, there are so many colorful interactions in this movie, and all kinds of different inconveniences throughout, whether it's like a gas shortage or whatever. You never lose your sense of place, and you never lose that lack of momentum in the story. I really just felt completely swept up, and like it was cuddling me, this film. I truly just trusted in Paul Thomas Anderson and what I know that he is capable of doing, and I was charmed fully all the way through. And this is a movie that I think is really special, and it's one I think I will need to revisit many times, like pretty much every Paul Thomas Anderson film. Like I said, so rich and so dense and all kinds of things. And just the themes are not going to be right towards the surface. You have to look for them a little bit more. But yes, that emotion, that ache of the heart when you look through like a photo album or like a scrapbook, I mean, that exists all the way through this movie. It made me feel like I was going through my mom's childhood bedroom and looking through all her vinyl records and the different pictures. There is a smell to all of that, and I swear I could smell this movie. I know the world building is really, really strong when it feels almost like I can smell everything. It's hard to find moments of building tension in a movie like this, especially a movie where the love story is never fully paid off. They had to learn to make that relationship based on real trust and truly caring about another person. And there's an honesty there that is very pure, very sweet, but also really just, really important. I think that builds a really solid foundation for them. And that's the thing that we attach ourselves to, because this could have gone into a really transgressive direction had they actually gotten together. And then it would have changed completely the tone of everything. And then I think the audience would begin to judge them, sharply judge them. Yes, there is judgment going on here, but this would completely take it in a different direction and completely ruin the whole point of it. And I'm just more moved by that idea. And I think a lot of people are. And that's why we don't outright reject the relationship, because I think it is a complicated situation on the way to a romance. I love movies that take place in a world that is full of mishaps, that is always conscious of its surroundings, of the environment, of the politics at the time. And as I said, there are all kinds of different encounters. Some really, really great performances by people like Bradley Cooper and Sean Penn. Even Tom Waits is in this film. All the side characters are just fantastic. But yeah, just serendipitous things. Waking up, having a good day, maybe having a boring day, getting into trouble, finding kindred spirits along the way. And it's never one-dimensional. It's nostalgia with true perspective, with true inner reflection and honesty. Everyone needs to see this movie. It is a home run. And that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I am an artist and I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I want to give a shout out to my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. And if you're interested in becoming a patron, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.